Coming up, this Kawasaki barn find rebuild spiraled out of control after a couple simple fixes turned into a complete teardown to the frame to address some serious issues and make some upgrades along the way as we try and make this old girl run again and street legal after sitting for decades. Let's rewind and see where we started 3 months ago.
Well, here we've got our 1974 Kawasaki G5 barn find. And last time, we actually got this thing running. But now we have to make it reliable and fix all the things that we found wrong on our first test drive. So let's go ahead and start addressing those issues. First problem, crank seals, absolutely toast. Front forks, blown to smithereens. Rear shocks, also blown. Headlight, dead. Signals, dead. Taillight, also dead. Kickstand, flaccid. Tank, dented.
Well, that short list was very optimistic, as you'll soon find out.
All right, let's get an easy win out of the way, and let's replace these original over 40-year-old shocks. Wait, how old is this bike now? Over 50-year-old shocks. Replace them with these eBay specials. So, are these any good? Probably not. Are they better than what's on here? I think so. So, let's go ahead, see if they fit, and test them out. There. Easy part is done, but we're not ready to put it on the ground yet to see how these feel. We have some other stuff we want to address next, like crank seals.
The crank seals are vital for two-stroke operation because the fuel, oil, and air mixture is mixed in the crankcase to lubricate the bearings and piston. As the piston moves down into the crankcase, it pressurizes it, forcing air into the combustion chamber. As the piston goes back up, the pressure drops and pulls air and fuel through your carburetor. Except if your crank seals are bad, it will pull in unmetered air past the seals and make you run lean and find the melting point of your piston. Needless to say, we suspect that these are original and likely culprit for why the engine just couldn't run right.
Oh, I'm missing one. Hey, shouldn't we have drained the oil beforehand? Yeah. One successful oil change later.
Previous setup was a safety hazard, so we upgraded.
Does he even know how to read? There's pictures in here. The pictures make it look like we need to take the other cover off first, find some way to hold this clutch so we can stop the engine from rotating to take the flywheel off. So let's go over on the other side before we make too much of a mess over here. Oh, geez, I'm like pushing over the bike. We're gonna tuck these gears goodnight. I'm gonna read him a bedtime story? Yeah, the manual. All right, what are the chances this is a reverse thread? I didn't even read the manual, by the way. I just saw the picture. Maybe we gotta use a puller.
Since we have to wait for a puller for the flywheel to come in, back to the other side to continue disassembly to reach the crank seal under the intake.
This just did pull off. Cool. We got your boy here to help. We got our 12-ton press. Hopefully we don't need to use all 12 tons of it. Getting closer. Not damaged.
The old crank seal looks tired and can definitely tell the lip is worn. Good thing we're replacing it. I'm using the old seal as a sacrificial seal driver to install the new one. I also put the seal in the freezer to help the metal shrink down and make the installation easier, as these are press fit and really tight.
Flush. Pretty sure it goes this way, right? Oh, okay. Oh, disgusting. Gotta get a close up of the carnage. I'm sorry. I really tried to do better. Yeah, there we go. It's conveniently grew a third hand. Just when I needed it. 40 inch-pounds. Someone named David on the other side of the camera managed to drop the bike and destroy the throttle housing and the brake lever. So we have some extra work for ourselves to accomplish, but pretty easy. And then we can start working on some other stuff. Let's go. The ignition switch connector is behind the headlight. So, is there just one screw? Good thing that's not an active nest. Look at this. Very impressive. Okay, where is that wire? Where does that wire go? Okay. You know, maybe we'll just leave this undone so we can make sure that all the stuff works. You know?
Planning, thinking ahead.
Okay, very strong suspicion that none of the lights work because of these cut wires. So get better access to them. Let's go ahead and take the tank off. And this actually goes into the instrument cluster. Oh, these have probably never been undone in its whole life. Okay, there we go. Oh. Alright, so for the repair, we're going to be using these little crimps. These are going to make a very nice mechanical connection, and this is just how they're going to work. Slide them in both ends, grip them, and then we'll make sure that we actually put one of these on first. And then we'll heat shrink it, and it'll be good. There we go. I think we can actually test this out. We can just put the battery in. A little tiny baby battery. I'm assuming this goes here.
Everything finally connected, and this was the result. Total darkness as every single bulb on this bike was burnt out, most annoyingly the headlight, as these are quite simply unobtainium and sealed, so you can't repair it. I'll go over how I address this issue later, but the flywheel tool came in, so we can go ahead and continue working on the crank seals.
Sir, what do you have to say about the recent developments on this engine?
We gotta pull the engine out to reach this crank seal and split the case.
Did you or did you not read that before doing this job?
We've already been over this, that I don't know how to read.
Pulling the engine out is a super daunting task with only 4 bolts and having to disconnect the airbox and disconnecting the chain. On the table, it's also about the size of a Thanksgiving turkey, with, coincidentally, about the same top speed as well.
So definitely don't use this as a how-to guide. You're doing everything in the wrong order. Next is going to deal with the cylinder head, pull it off, and then pull the jug off. I'm very impressed with what this thing looks like. There's no scoring, but I just kind of wiped away with my fingernail, with the glove. This is very clean. 5,500 miles on this, by the way. Someone's probably been in here. David also managed to break the exhaust stud here. When we put everything back together, we will have to deal with that. From the pictures, it looks like we can split this in half. Should be pretty straightforward to do that, and then leave all of the actual components on this side of the case. So we'll pull this side off. All the hardware is just here. All these little screws, we'll bang them out. Split the case. So
Easy.
yeah.
Actually splitting it is easier said than done. Of course, there are special case splitting tools and we don't have them. So we're stuck trying to pry this apart with a rubber mallet and a screwdriver. Unfortunately, there are no pry points on this case, and it is made of aluminum, which provides generous room for you to make mistakes. We'll know if we made a mistake when it doesn't seal back up and leaks all of its oil out.
Oh, there we go.
First try.
First try.
Welded. Easy.
It's the next morning, and this is where we're at now. We have all of the oil seals installed on the side of the case, and we have managed to clean it up really nicely, ready for its gasket maker. This does not use a paper gasket, you just use a sealant for this. So now we can start putting the two halves together, and we need to make sure that we have all the parts we need before we seal it up. So we're going to be looking at some pictures, trying to read. I think we'll be ready to slap this together.
Definitely a newbie mistake right here, using this black silicone gasket maker, as it's not fuel resistant, and I didn't even think anything of it until editing this video. We'll see how long it lasts and if we have any problems with it, but you can use this as an example of what not to do. All the hardware were different lengths, so we made sure to stick them into a piece of cardboard to make sure that they go back in their original locations.
All right, fresh gasket. Okay, oiled up the piston, the rings, and the jug to try and make this easier, and I'm pretty sure that's what you're supposed to do. Did you look up any directions, David?
No.
No, I didn't either. Looks like there's a taper to this jug as well.
Oh. What is this?
What fell?
Is that the ring?
Yeah.
Oh, new rings inbound.
Did you look up how to do this? No. All right, we're stuck waiting for parts, so we're trying to find some other things to do, and that's to deal with this kickstand next. It's very floppy and missing a good return spring. Let's take this off and see what we're working with. What? You gotta be kidding me. Is it moving? Can you tell if it's moved?
No, it definitely has not moved.
Update, you may now notice that the kickstand is missing. Good news is we found a spring for the kickstand. Bad news is that this end right here is completely worn out. We're gonna weld on some more material onto there. Other bad news is these threads are absolutely demolished. Some prior owner blasted through this 3/8 bolt through what is probably a M8 or M10 bolt hole, also demolished. So we now need to figure out how we're gonna fix these threads. And oh, another thing, you know, the problems don't just stop. This captive nut, there's an example on the other side. There's a captive nut here, which is what it's supposed to look like. and this is what it looks like on this side. So this side needs a lot of help.
Alright, plan to unscrew up these holes. It's a drill them out, and then use bigger hardware so that way we can put new hardware into it, and that'll fix everything.
Don't get too excited and go in dry. It's gotta be moist. Careful, SpongeBob.
With the new threads tapped, we'll see if this works during final assembly.
Alright, David, you ready to eat dinner? Got your fork? I'm a hungry boy. Instructions say to take off this top bolt first before you take it off the bike, but we're gonna do it my way. Easy. Oh. Rip that off. Another mythical third hand shows up.
Ooh, mistakes were made. All right, David, what kind of goodies we got there?
We got new seals. If I can open it with my oily hands. Here we go. New seal.
Yo, luckily the directions are like really thorough, and they say that installation is just the reverse of removal. You got it from here, right?
Yeah, I just oil it up a little bit, slap it right in, and I'm good to go.
Show the people what you did.
It's upside down.
Okay, now this is the correct orientation. And there we go, something like that. And then you just blast it with the impact.
Yeah.
Done.
Yep, you seen one fork, you seen them all.
And that's true. The other one was the exact same process, and they both cleaned up nicely with no surprises.
Probably gonna get a lot of hate for this, but we're gonna just put these old ones right back on. But we have a 3D printer, and we got to justify that. So I think we're going to 3D print new ones and just see how it works out.
I printed these out of TPU with about 95% infill, and they look pretty decent, better than the destroyed rubber dust boots, so we'll see how long they last. To finish up the front end, we just need to reconnect the disc brake and speedometer cable, and we're all done. Just in time for new piston rings to come in. We technically don't have to remove the piston, but if we want to actually follow directions, it's needed for the next steps coming up. The wrist pin can be frozen in there with carbon buildup, so some light heat to loosen it up was required. On the other side, I lightly tapped it out with a socket, and out it came. The wrist pin bearing came out next, and it's actually in really good condition, and we're going to be reusing it.
Okay, the reason we had to pull the piston out is so that we can measure the end gap of the new rings. Take the new rings, push them down into the bore, and then take our feeler gauge. We will measure the end gap. So we'll see how that turns out. This should be a standard piston. I measured it, and these are standard rings. These should work. Now just to clean this up, make sure that all the carbon is out from the grooves. Fits.
Too tight, and the rings won't have anywhere to expand as they heat up, and will destroy both the piston and the bore. Too loose, and we lose vital compression.
And
luckily, these didn't need any modifying and were within spec, but not so lucky, these didn't fit. And the next soonest estimated arrival time was over 2 weeks for the other part number. Not cool. While we wait, we can go ahead and work on the kickstand to weld on new material to make it actually stand straight. After some cleaning, some welding, some grinding, some more welding, and even more grinding, I got something that I think will work. And with some paint, you will never know the difference. The bottom of the kickstand also got the same treatment. While we continue to wait for parts, we have a great activity lined up of watching paint dry. Next, we are dealing with the lighting situation with the nuclear option, a 12-volt conversion. I'm going to release a longer video going a lot more in depth, but for now, all you need to know is that I'm doing this because it's impossible to find a replacement original headlight for 6 volts. All the other bulbs are burnt out or missing, and 12-volt items are cheaper and more available if they need replacement. But this means we now need new 12-volt everything, including battery, bulbs, signals for brakes and lights and gauges. We need a new flasher relay and a new horn. If everything on your bike works, there's not much of a need to do it, but for me, makes total sense. To help accomplish this goal, I've come up with a plan, and that includes drawing out the complete lighting and charge circuit to actually see what I'm doing. In short, we need to stick a 4-pin voltage regulator into the mix, connecting the 2 AC outputs from the charge coils on the stator to the 2 inputs on the voltage regulator, connect to ground, and then our regulated and rectified output to the battery positive terminal. We also need to run a dedicated power wire to the 12-volt headlight because the old one actually ran directly off of the stator, but it only ran in night mode. So now we're going to create a new sub-harness for the headlight using a standard 4-pin relay. So that includes a signal in, power out, and a ground. We will have to splice into the brown wire coming from the ignition switch somewhere. So we're going to completely bypass the ignition switch circuit for the headlight. One very important thing to note is that this bike has a completely separate ignition system. This bike is so simple, it doesn't even need a battery to run. It can run simply off of the stator, which is actually how it ran when I first got it. So we're going to just make sure not to touch it because we know it works, for now. Enough theory, here's how we're going to apply it. From the stator, we're keeping the black wire for ignition untouched. And then we're using the light blue and pink as our AC source into the voltage regulator. Yellow is direct power to the headlight, which is no longer being used, and the green is a neutral safety switch, which we are obviously still keeping. On the main wiring harness, these connectors are just no longer being used, and in their place is going to be the new voltage regulator, so these can just be safely tucked away. The red wire received power from the ignition switch when in night mode, but it will now get direct 12-volt power from a relay rather than the ignition switch. So this is a lot better of a solution than running full headlight battery voltage through the switch directly. The original rectifier, blue, white, and white wire are no longer being used. Instead, we'll run the rectified output from the regulator to the brown and white wire, which connects to the battery, and then also it feeds power to the main ignition switch. And here, the flasher is just plug and play. This just gets replaced with an LED compatible 12-volt unit. Now we can go ahead and start building the sub-harness to connect everything together. To make sure that I don't hack up any wiring and become a dreaded previous owner, we can have all of our modifications be reversible by using this terminal kit from Vintage Connections. I reached out to them about this project and they wanted to support it and sent out their CK2 kit, which has everything we need to do this wiring job correctly. This Kawasaki uses 4mm bullet connectors, so everything quite literally becomes plug and play. Using their crimping tool, we can get solid connections that won't break or vibrate loose over time, and I've personally used their kits before on our Suzuki GS750 project and our Datsun 280Z, and it's seriously been a lifesaver. If you don't want to hack up your wiring on your vintage project, you can get 10% off your entire order by using the code DDG10. For the relay, I'm using an extra 4-pin normally open relay from my 300ZX. This relay is actually a headlight relay, so it can definitely handle the single 35-watt bulb we'll be using. This is also where I'm splicing into the brown wire for the relay signal, and is the most invasive maneuver on this whole conversion process. I'm surprised to see that the original harness uses soldered splices because normally manufacturers use crimps, like I've run into on my 280Z and 300ZX. So I'm just going to solder in our signal wire, but this is also totally easily reversible. I've unwrapped this harness because I still needed to make a few repairs and replace a few completely roached connectors with new ones from our kit. So we'll go ahead and rewrap the harness and start tidying everything up, getting ready to test and see if any of this actually works. I've gone ahead and created the ground cable for the battery, the positive lead that goes to the main ignition switch, the headlight sub harness. We have the ignition switch hooked in, ready to go. We should be able to test this out right now. Since we're now on the topic of headlights, this is now a good time to talk about what I'm actually using to replace the original burnt out 6-volt unit. I've gone ahead and purchased from Amazon a just conversion headlight bulb. It's a 5 3/4 inch unit that's just meant to use a standard H4 bulb that you can just plop in there. It's no longer sealed, so if this burns out, we're not screwed. We cannot reuse the original bucket because it's just, the new lens is too wide and there's no such thing, or at least what I can find, no such thing as a just basic 5-inch headlight that will fit here. Doesn't exist. Turn it. Yep, there we go. We got light. This is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. And was there ever even a doubt that this wouldn't work? Come on. With the bulb working, we need to actually mount the new headlight bucket, so that means disconnecting all the wiring, removing the old one, and test fitting the new one to see if we have any issues. And spoiler alert, we had some issues. New headlight is in place, and this is a problem. You're fouling on the speedometer cable. This cheapo headlight bucket came with some brackets, which I'm going to sacrifice to extend the mounting position. It looks a little wacky, but it works, and I quite literally have no other options to get a headlight working. Look at that. Look at that. We got a mounted headlight bucket. Of course, I can't leave it ugly, so a quick coat of paint to make it all one shade of black to tidy up the front end, and we have a really nice looking headlight. Oh, and it still works, which is a plus. I built a temporary bracket to hold the electrical components while testing, but now I've got to figure out how to securely mount the battery. I actually learned that AGM batteries can be mounted in any direction, which is great for me because the new 12-volt battery is physically larger than the old 6-volt unit and fits vertically between the frame and the original oil tank. Rather than fabricating an entirely new battery box, I've gone ahead and just lightly modified the old one to fit the new battery.
Fits. Although we'll get rid of that.
I've also gone ahead and fabricated a tab to mount the relay to the battery box and riveted it to the box to give it an OEM-like look, which I think looks really good. After a quick coat of paint, the battery is securely mounted in the original location with our relay and flasher both easily accessible. Headlight done, let's address the turn signals. The fronts are still there, which means we just need to swap out the bulbs with new LED units. Very easy. To finish the front, we just now need to replace all the bulbs in the ignition switch and the speedometer with new LED 12-volt units. All of the old bulbs were completely corroded, burnt, and a total nightmare to get out, and destroyed them.
With the front mostly buttoned up, we can go ahead and work on these rear turn signals. Now, this is the closest I could find to an original turn signal. They're way too expensive on eBay if you can find them. And of course, the only problem is that they don't fit, at least not with some modifications. The weird width here that Kawasaki came up with for this little mounting bracket is so annoying because it's just so wide. These obviously don't have enough thread to go all the way. So what I've done instead is whipped up a little conversion bracket, just 3D printed it out of ABS. So we can go ahead, mount the bracket to the bike, then the signal to the bracket, and we'll have a mounted turn signal. The next problem is actually the wiring. 2 wires, very simple. However, we have to make up our own ground wire. There's only 2 that come here. And if we looked at our wiring diagram, you would notice that these are actually both power wires. So we got to figure out grounds on our own. So we're going to mount a ground that goes all the way back to the main ground by the battery. The other thing is that these are 3.5mm connectors, not the 4mm that are used on the Kawasaki. So again, big thank you and shout out to Vintage Connections because you know, they're going to make this a lot easier for us to not hack up our wiring even more. So we'll have OEM-like turn signal bullet connectors that we can go ahead and install and make it really easy and seamless. So, and of course, in case we ever find original turn signals that we want to use, they'll just plug right in.
Now, both left and right turn signals work. Nice.
Look at that. Oh. Disgusting bulb. Gone ahead, install my new light. So let's go and check it out. We got on. Whoa, and that is really bright. Brake lever does nothing. So it seems like the light is just constantly on. All right, gone ahead, disconnected the brake signal. So now the light should only turn on when it's in night mode. So day mode, headlight is on for safety, and night mode, taillight is now on. So that works as expected. Now if I go ahead and I connect that, yep, you can see that we're getting a constant brake signal. Front, and I'm going to be messing around with these blue and red wires and brown wires here in the front. It actually goes from the front brake lever switch down into the headlight, has a little connector. So right now, disconnected it. We are in night mode, and I connect it, and boom, we get the brake light. We shouldn't be getting the brake light because it's not, it's obviously not being touched. So something in this switch is constantly on. All right, that's the end of the switch. And it's missing that one little bit. All right, it's been over 2 weeks since I've last been disappointed, but the new piston rings have finally showed up, so we can go ahead and try and put these two together. And it's a good thing checking the ring gap on this set. The first one was fine, but this one, I cannot get the minimum spec in to drag nicely. It pinches. So we're gonna file down just a little bit. All right, these rings, definitely the correct ones to get. These ones fit a lot better and can actually compress them down, and they fit nicely. Nicely oiled up. Get this bearing in here. Now comes the part of actually reading and following directions, making sure to compress the piston rings as they enter the jug and are aligned properly on their locating pins. Turns out it's actually pretty easy. For some reason, the audio didn't pick up the clicks nicely, which leaves me deeply unsatisfied. But we're ready to reinstall the engine into the bike, so it's actually starting to look like a motorcycle now, and not just scrap metal in the middle of the garage. All right, everything is coming together really quickly now, so that means soon we'll be ready to actually start this. But we're gonna need gas, and this gas tank is not in the best condition. I really want to pull the dents and see if any of the suggestions I got from comments would actually work, which included using an inner tube or using compressed air to fill up the tank and a heat gun. Using the inner tube, it immediately tore when I tried to stuff it in there, and using compressed air with the heat gun felt like I had a bomb between my legs.
The dents were pretty well creased in the tank, so even this paintless dent repair kit stood no chance. In the end, I spent about 2 hours struggling and not getting anywhere. So I went with the nuclear option. I just used the other tank that the bike came with when I got it. No dents on the side, but the only kicker, it's very rusty and very obviously has some leaks and some poor repairs done to it. So that needs to be addressed. It's really just one edge of the tank that is suffering from the rot. So I hit it with some strip wheels and 80 grit sandpaper to clean up the surface, and it worked really well. Someone had previously tried to weld the tank, but it looked really awful. Not sure I could do better, but I smoothed it out and it looks a lot better now. Next, I'm going to try probably the sketchiest repair to see if it actually works. After all, I read it on the internet, so it has to be true. I'll let the results speak for themselves because maybe one day you'll find it useful.
Alright, I knew there were going to be at least 2, but we have one here, we've got one here, right here, and look at that hole.
For this repair, I'm going to be using Seal All. It's not an epoxy, but rather a super strong oil and gas resistant contact adhesive. Super easy to use. I just prepped the surface with acetone to clean it, and I'm just going to smear it around. To further strengthen the repair, I've gone ahead and cut out some small squares of some old ripstop camo and soaked them in the adhesive. This will work very similar to fiberglass or carbon fiber if you've ever worked with them, and it's going to help give some structure to the repair and especially bridge the gap on the massive hole in the front.
This is probably the worst repair I've ever done. I can't believe I'm going to show you how I did it. Went ahead and put down some patches for the other pinholes. Alright, I've got a pretty low standard for repairs, but this is a new low for me, and I'll be very, very impressed if this actually works. So now the only thing left to do now is to let this cure overnight, hit it with some light sandpaper to maximize adhesion for paint, give it a quick coat, and we'll call it done. Then we'll go ahead and get the electrolysis started. All right, big reveal. Here we go. That's it.
Yeah, it's the same black spray paint used for everything else, but on the bike you can't even tell that it was repaired unless you're under 3 feet tall looking underneath. So I'm very happy with the results so far, just need to deal with the rust on the inside. For the electrolysis, I used about 4 tablespoons of baking soda to a completely full tank, which is just under 2 gallons. I connected up the battery charger with the positive lead to an old Allen key and the negative lead to the fuel tank body. Pretty soon I was able to see little bubbles going wild and going to work. Now to just let it sit and do its thing. I later dumped some loose bolts and vinegar into the tank to swish it around and cleaned it out. It turned out really nice and it's just ready to be installed and get some fuel into it.
All right, we are almost ready to get this thing fired up. I've finished up the fuel tank. It looks good on the inside now. We've got the fuel line connected and carburetor hooked up. Next thing what we have to do, very important, is we have to prime this oil pump. Because this has been left undone, oil is drained out, there would be a period of time where there would be no oil injection and just straight fuel on this. That would be incredibly damaging and a very bad idea. So what we have to do is run premix first, and then we will hook up the oil line once we can verify that this is running. We've got some oil in here. We'll connect up this guy. Put some fuel in here, some premix. Calls for a 20-to-1. Let's go ahead and put some premix in here, put some oil in the crankcase, and get it fired up. Go to like half choke. Woo! Okay.
On a later test, I did check the charging and it was doing something, but kind of low, so we'll see if that's an issue or not. Right after this, another issue quickly developed.
It just all of a sudden and abruptly died. It stopped having spark. Turn everything on. So there's no spark. So let's go take the cover off on the other side. Well, everything is how I left it. So let's pull the flywheel off and see what's going on underneath.
The pitting in the surface is indicative of a failing condenser, so good thing we've got both new points and condenser we can go ahead and install.
We will have to adjust this later. Alright, so the old one looked like it had these all soldered together and then these tabs bent over. So I'm gonna try get some fresh solder, make them nice and toasty. Unfortunately, my other third hand is no longer available. I'm just gonna add a lot. Alright.
I'm going to adjust the points using my multimeter. This is by far the most accurate way to do it compared to using something like a feeler gauge. The wire on the points needs to be removed and the flywheel reinstalled because it actually is a cam that the points ride on that opens and closes it. We're going to be measuring the exact location where the points lose continuity by setting our multimeter to the continuity setting, have one terminal on ground and the other on the points, and noting where the beeping stops. We want the beeping to stop right on the timing mark. If not, we can make the adjustment until it does.
That's pretty close. Maybe you could adjust it just a little bit more.
To verify timing, we can use a timing light. And would you look at that? It's perfect.
Of course, this coil tests way out of spec. What is 175,000 ohms, 200,000 ohms. I'll put the numbers on the screen, but none of these are right. Yeah, this is way out of spec. This is going wild. This coil is bad. And this spark plug just decided to stop sparking. It just stopped. I had to replace the ignition coil connector because new one came in the wrong size.
New coil, new spark plug. So what was the actual problem with the ignition? Well, multiple things failed at once, I believe. The ignition coil was weak and on its way out, leading to a weak and inconsistent spark. The points were also deeply pitted, and the condenser was almost for sure bad. There's not really a good way to test it though, so I'm pretty sure it was bad. And for the cherry on top, the spark plug just straight up died. Hard to believe this thing even ran. Now we can finally button up the bike for good. Paint mark everything that we've touched after adjustment or torquing it down. Slap on all the final details, and we're ready to go for its first test ride.
Filling it up with oil, hopefully for the last time.
The last issue to solve was not mechanical, but administrative. When I bought it originally in part 1, it didn't have a title, so we've jumped through the hoops, and now it's fully registered and legal with a plate.
Okay, just a little pre-flight check and testing out the audio for the first time on the GoPro like this, so if it sounds like shit, I'll just voice over it.
It feels so good to finally have the bike on the road after it's been completely blown apart. On this test ride, in the first couple minutes, we had some teething issues, kind of as expected. The clutch seemed to slip really easily when upshifting and during full throttle. And then going up the hill, it seemed to bog down, almost like it had some jetting issue or was starving for fuel. Both of these problems mostly cleared up after a couple minutes of riding, so maybe it was just cold and we needed some oil just splashed around. I'm not really sure, but it didn't really come back. I also noticed the speedometer got stuck right around the 40-mile-an-hour mark. This ended up being the backing was actually bent and it was catching the needle. Easy fix, just bend it back to normal. I definitely need a new set of handlebars. These are bent way out of whack and are uncomfortable, forcing my body position to be all wrong. The 35 watt headlight bulb I think was also a mistake given the original was just 25 watts. I think it draws too much power and doesn't let the battery actually charge, because by the end of my test ride after 25-30 minutes, the headlight was completely dead and I only had about 9 volts left on the battery. I think I'm going to see if I can use the original headlight yellow wire from the stator as an AC source to the voltage regulator and see if that makes a difference. Otherwise, I'll look into getting a lower wattage LED bulb. The only issue and why I avoided it in the beginning is that there's so much trash on the market with LED bulbs, and they're not meant for use in the halogen projection housings. So I just went with a basic halogen bulb. I guess that was a mistake. I also managed to drop the bike as it fell off the kickstand idling and already broke one of my turn signal brackets. So I'll have to just 3D print a new one or get some slimmer ones. Let me know if you're interested in seeing the bike a little bit more modern with some slimmer signals, bars, some visual mods. You know, I gotta get a new rear fender because this is just itching to finally look nice. But I need you guys to tell me that you actually want to see it. Other than that, it runs really well. The original running issue where it would get warm, sputter out, and die has been completely fixed. It also feels like it has more power and it's a little bit more peppier, especially down low. So far, I think I've topped it out at a little bit over 50 miles an hour, which I think is pretty good for it. The suspension feels so much better with the rebuilt front forks and rear shocks. The front feels a lot more confidence inspiring, and the rear actually has dampening now, so we actually feel a lot more planted. From the beginning of this episode to now, it's been 2.5 months of hard labor turning this old girl from a dilapidated barn find to a running, riding, and legal motorcycle. Any other buyer may have just parted her out on eBay, but now she's ready to go on another adventure, which if you subscribe, maybe we'll actually go on. And we're always ready and willing to take suggestions in the comments below on what you want to see and if we should take on another project just like this. We always have our eyes out for anything fun and anything unusual, and this fit the bill, but there's plenty of other things that we can go ahead and spend our time on. So if you like these vintage motorcycles and want to see more of them, go ahead, leave a comment, subscribe, and like the video. And again, we read all the comments and they mean a lot to us. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.